there's a quiet kind of frustration that almost nobody talks about. It's the moment you open your banking app, look at your savings, and instead of feeling proud, you feel tired, not broke, not panicked, just deeply unimpressed. You've been doing the right things, spending less, saying no more often, holding back when something fun shows up, and yet the number sitting there doesn't feel like progress. It feels like proof that none of this is working. You start wondering something that feels dangerous to admit out loud. What if saving money like this is pointless? Something breaks, something goes wrong, something needs fixing, and suddenly months of effort disappear without changing how safe you feel. This video isn't about how to save more. It's about why saving feels emotionally useless for so long, and why that feeling isn't a personal failure. It's a design flaw in how our brains experience money. Most people believe that saving money should feel good immediately, that every step forward should feel motivating, that progress should be obvious. But that belief is exactly what makes people quit. Because early saving doesn't feel like winning. It feels like holding your breath underwater, waiting for something to happen. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Before a certain point, saving money isn't rewarding. It's defensive. It's quiet. It's invisible. You don't feel richer. You don't feel safer. You just feel restricted. That's why someone with no savings can look happier than someone who's trying. They're not better with money. They're just not stuck in the most psychologically difficult phase. This phase tricks smart, disciplined people into thinking they're doing something wrong, when in reality, they're right on schedule. If you've ever thought, I've been saving for months and nothing has changed, or why does this feel harder than it should, or I'm doing everything right and still feel one mistake away from zero, this is for you. Because the problem isn't that you lack discipline. The problem is that early saving doesn't give your brain what it needs to feel progress. Your brain doesn't reward effort. It rewards impact. And small amounts of money don't create impact yet. They create protection. Protection doesn't feel exciting. It feels fragile. Imagine carrying a glass of water across a crowded room. Every step requires focus. Every bump feels dangerous. You don't feel successful for holding the glass. You just feel stressed about not spilling it. That's what early saving feels like. You're not building something yet. You're just trying not to drop it. And no one tells you how mentally exhausting that is. So people assume, if this feels bad, it must be wrong. If this doesn't feel empowering, it must not be working. If I don't feel different, I probably am not different. Because there is a point where this flips. A point where your brain finally understands why you've been doing this. Most people quit right before they reach it. Not because they're weak. Not because they're irresponsible. But because no one explained what this phase is actually for. Saving before that point isn't about wealth. It's about identity. It's about crossing from trying to be careful into having control. And until you cross it, everything feels harder than it should. If you're stuck in that space where you're doing the work but not feeling the reward, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just early. And once you understand what's really happening psychologically, you stop fighting yourself and start using the process the way it actually works. That's what we're going to talk about. Why saving money feels useless for so long. Why your motivation fades even when you're doing the right things. And why the discomfort you feel right now is not a warning sign. It's a signal that you're closer than you think. Not in theory, not in a spreadsheet, but in your normal, ordinary days. You decide to be more responsible with money, not in an extreme way, just more careful. You start checking prices. You pause before buying things. You skip small comforts that used to feel automatic. Coffee becomes optional. Eating out becomes a debate. Every purchase comes with a quiet question in your head. Do I really need this? At first, it feels manageable, even empowering. You feel like an adult, like you're finally doing what you're supposed to be doing. Then life does what life always does. Your phone slips. Your car makes a sound it didn't make before. A bill shows up that you forgot existed. Something small but unavoidable. And just like that, the money you were proud of is gone. Not all of it, just enough to hurt. You don't panic, but something inside you deflates. Because it didn't change anything. You're still careful, still tense, still checking balances before making normal decisions. So you rebuild, a little at a time, week by week, month by month. You get back to where you were, maybe a little higher, and then something else happens. Not dramatic, not a crisis, just another reminder that your margin is thin. This cycle repeats quietly. No fireworks, no lessons learned, just effort followed by erasure. And over time, a question starts forming in the background. What am I actually doing this for? You're not buying freedom. You're not buying comfort. You're not buying choices. You're just delaying stress. And delaying stress doesn't feel like progress. It feels like maintenance. That's the part people don't warn you about. Early saving doesn't feel like moving forward. It feels like staying in place slightly more responsibly. You're not rewarded with relief. You're rewarded with the ability to handle the next problem without completely falling apart. Which sounds good in theory, but emotionally it's exhausting. Because effort without visible change feels like failure, even when it isn't. Meanwhile, you look around and see people spending freely. They seem relaxed. They seem lighter. They're not counting. They're not hesitating. They're not living inside their heads during every purchase. And that comparison messes with you. Not because you want what they have, but because you want how they feel. Unburdened, unrestricted, normal. You start to feel like saving is turning you into a worse version of yourself. More anxious, more rigid, less fun. And that's when the internal conflict really begins. Part of you knows saving is responsible. You're doing everything right, but it doesn't feel right. That disconnect creates frustration, and frustration creates resentment. Resentment toward the process, toward yourself, toward the idea that this is how it's supposed to be. So you start bargaining. Maybe I don't need to save this much. Maybe I should enjoy life a little. Maybe I'll take a break and start again later. Because right now, this doesn't feel like building a future. It feels like denying the present. What makes this especially confusing is that nothing is technically wrong. You're not overspending. You're not drowning. You're not ignoring reality. You're doing the thing everyone says to do. And yet emotionally, it feels unsustainable. You're constantly aware of money, but never comfortable with it. Every dollar saved feels temporary. Every balance feels fragile. Every small win feels reversible. You don't feel secure. You feel exposed. That feeling makes you hyper-aware of risk. You hesitate more. You stress more. You overthink simple choices. And slowly, saving stops feeling like empowerment and starts feeling like pressure. Pressure to not mess up. Pressure to not touch the money. Pressure to justify every decision. This is where people quietly give up. Not with a dramatic moment. Not with a big purchase. But with a subtle shift. They stop trying as hard. They stop tracking. They stop caring as much. Because emotionally, it feels safer to stop hoping. If you expect nothing from saving, you can't be disappointed by it. This is the hidden problem no one explains. Early saving creates responsibility before it creates relief. You take on the mental weight of being careful without yet receiving the benefits of stability. You're carrying discipline without leverage. And discipline without leverage feels like self-denial. So if you've ever thought, I'm doing all this work and still feel one step from stress, that's not negativity. That's accuracy. You're noticing the gap between effort and impact. And that gap is real. The mistake is assuming it means saving isn't working. What it actually means is that you're in the hardest, psychological stage of the entire process. The stage where awareness increases faster than safety. Where discipline increases faster than comfort. Where effort increases faster than reward. No one stays motivated here because motivation isn't what carries you through this phase. Understanding does. Once you see what's actually happening, you stop expecting early saving to feel good. And when you stop expecting it to feel good, you stop fighting yourself for feeling the way you do. Because the frustration isn't a failure. It's a symptom. And the next step is understanding why your brain reacts this way at all. To understand why saving money feels so unrewarding at the beginning, you have to understand one simple thing about the human brain. Your brain does not care about effort. It cares about change. You can work incredibly hard, make sacrifices. Your brain quietly labels the effort as inefficient. Not wrong, just inefficient. This is why early saving feels so discouraging. You are putting in real effort, but your lived experience stays the same. You wake up in the same place, go to the same job, feel the same financial tension, make the same cautious decisions. Nothing around you signals progress, and the brain relies heavily on signals. Think about how your brain handles pain. If you touch something hot, the feedback is immediate. Your brain learns instantly. But if you touch something that hurts you slowly, over time, without a clear moment of cause and effect, your brain struggles to associate the behavior with the outcome. Saving money is slow pain with delayed relief, and the relief doesn't arrive evenly. It arrives in chunks. Until you reach one of those chunks, your brain experiences saving as pure restriction. Another way to think about this is through contrast. Your brain evaluates progress by comparing before and after. If the before and after look the same, the brain assumes nothing meaningful has happened. You still hesitate. You still worrying. You still check balances. You still feel exposed. So the brain asks a reasonable question. Why are we doing this? That question isn't laziness. It's efficiency. Your brain is constantly trying to conserve energy. It doesn't want to maintain behaviors that don't clearly improve survival or comfort. This creates what feels like internal resistance. But it's not self-sabotage. It's a mismatch between logic and experience. There's also something else happening beneath the surface. Your brain hates partial safety. Being fully unsafe triggers urgency. Being fully safe triggers calm. But being almost safe triggers anxiety. When you have nothing saved, you're forced to accept risk. You adapt. You cope. You improvise. When you have enough saved, you relax. You trust. You plan. But when you're somewhere in between, your brain stays on high alert. You're aware of risk, but not protected from it. That awareness without protection is exhausting. You're not in immediate danger, but you can't relax. This is why people with a small buffer often feel more stressed than people with none at all. They have something to lose, but not enough to feel secure. Your brain treats this as a fragile state, so it becomes protective, cautious, hyper-vigilant. That's why every purchase feels heavier. Every expense feels personal. Every setback feels bigger than it should. Your brain is guarding a weak boundary. Celebration requires belief. Belief requires evidence. If you celebrate something that doesn't materially change your situation, your brain feels the disconnect. It knows you're pretending. That doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you honest. The brain doesn't respond well to symbolic victories when the stakes still feel real. Small numbers feel abstract when they can't be used meaningfully. Your brain is constantly asking, what could this actually do? If the answer is not much, the money doesn't feel real yet. It feels like a placeholder, a promise, a maybe. That's why spending money on experiences feels satisfying. The impact is immediate and tangible. Saving early money creates no immediate experience, only restraint. So your brain frames it as loss, not gain. You didn't gain security. You lost comfort. And loss is felt more strongly than potential gain. There's also the identity issue. When you first start saving, you don't see yourself as someone who is financially secure. You see yourself as someone who is trying. Trying is unstable. Trying is effortful. Trying implies uncertainty, and uncertainty keeps the brain tense. The brain prefers stable identities. But before that shift happens, every choice feels manual. You're not acting from identity. You're acting from intention. Intentions are fragile. Identities are durable. This is why the early phase requires so much mental energy. You're not just managing money. You're managing yourself, your impulses, your fears, your doubts, your comparisons. And your brain keeps asking, how long do we have to keep doing this before it actually works? That question is the most dangerous part of early saving. Because if you don't have an answer, the brain supplies its own. It concludes, this is endless. This isn't changing anything. This is not worth the cost. That conclusion feels logical from inside the experience. which is why people don't quit saving dramatically. They drift away from it quietly. They stop paying attention. They loosen standards. They decide they'll be more serious later, not because they don't care, but because their brain has labeled the process as unsustainable. Understanding this changes everything. It means your frustration is not a warning sign. It's not proof that saving doesn't work. It's not evidence that you're bad with money. It's the predictable psychological response to delayed impact. The problem isn't that saving feels bad. The problem is expecting it to feel good before it has the power to. And that power comes from crossing a threshold, not a motivational threshold, a psychological one. Before that threshold, money protects. After it, money empowers. But because it's doing exactly what it evolved to do, the next section is where this becomes painfully clear. Because there is a hidden cost to staying in this early phase too long. And it's not about money at all. When people talk about the cost of not saving money, they usually talk about obvious things: stress, debt, emergencies, fear of the future. But there's a quieter cost that almost nobody talks about. And it only shows up when you're trying to save. It's the cost of living in constant financial anticipation. You're always waiting for something to happen, waiting for the next expense, waiting for the next problem, waiting to see if this month will be the one where nothing goes wrong. That waiting changes how you experience time. Months don't feel like progress. They feel like exposure. Every day you get through without a setback feels lucky, not earned. And luck is not a stable place to live psychologically. Because when your safety is fragile, your brain never relaxes. It stays in a low-level state of alert. You might not notice it as anxiety. It often shows up as tension, shorter patience, more irritation, more mental fatigue over small decisions. This is the invisible cost of early saving. You pay for responsibility with constant vigilance. And the longer you stay in this phase, the heavier that cost becomes. There's also the emotional cost of repeated resets. You save, something happens. You spend, you start over. On paper, this looks neutral. You handled the problem. You did what the money was there for. But emotionally, it feels like failure. Not because you failed financially, but because your sense of forward motion was erased. Your brain doesn't track dollars. It tracks effort over time. So when an expense wipes out several months of saving, your brain doesn't register money used responsibly. It registers months lost. That's why early setbacks hurt so much more than later ones. They take time from you, not just money, and time feels personal. This creates a dangerous association. Saving equals delayed disappointment. Every time you rebuild, a part of you expects the loss. You stop trusting the process. You start bracing for impact. Eventually, you stop letting yourself feel proud at all. Because pride feels risky. It sets you up to be disappointed again. So you stay emotionally flat. You save, but you don't enjoy it. You're careful, but not hopeful. That emotional flatness is not neutral. It slowly drains motivation. Another invisible cost is decision paralysis. When your margin is thin, every choice matters too much. You overthink purchases. You replay decisions. You second-guess yourself constantly. This doesn't make you better with money. It makes you tired. Fatigue leads to shortcuts. Shortcuts lead to impulsive decisions. Impulsive decisions lead to guilt. Guilt then reinforces the belief that money is stressful and confusing. This cycle doesn't come from irresponsibility. It comes from operating without enough margin to feel safe. There's also a social cost that's rarely acknowledged. When you're in this early phase, money becomes a private tension. You don't talk about it. You don't want to explain why you're saying no. So you withdraw a little. You skip things not because you can't afford them, but because you don't want to explain the calculation behind them. That creates distance. Not dramatic distance, just enough to feel disconnected. And disconnection has a cost too. Over time, saving starts to feel like isolation instead of empowerment. Another consequence is that your planning horizon shrinks. When money feels fragile, you stop thinking long-term. You don't ask big questions. You don't imagine changes. You don't plan beyond the next few months. Your mental energy is spent protecting what little you have. This keeps you reactive instead of proactive. You're managing risk, not shaping direction. That's not a character flaw. It's a survival response. But staying in survival mode for too long changes how you see yourself. You start to identify as someone who is always almost there, almost stable, almost comfortable, almost secure. Almost is a frustrating identity. It implies effort without arrival. Because quitting has a strange appeal. It removes the tension. If you stop trying to save, you stop waiting. You stop guarding. You stop hoping. You trade discipline for relief. That relief doesn't last. But in the moment, it feels like breathing out after holding your breath for too long. It's not rebellion. It's release. They're not chasing pleasure. They're escaping pressure. This is the real danger of staying too long below the threshold where saving starts to feel meaningful. It's not that you'll lose money. It's that you'll lose belief. Belief that effort pays off. Belief that patience leads somewhere. Belief that you're capable of building stability. And here's the most important part. None of this means you're doing something wrong. The invisible costs exist because early saving asks you to carry responsibility without giving you control. It asks you to behave like a stable person before you feel stable. That mismatch creates friction. Friction creates fatigue. Fatigue creates quitting. This is why the process needs a turning point, not a motivational speech, not a budget trick. A structural shift where the experience of saving finally matches the effort required to do it. That shift is not gradual. It's not subtle. It's noticeable. And when it happens, the invisible costs disappear almost overnight. Not because life gets perfect, but because your relationship with money changes. That's what the next section is about. The moment where saving stops feeling like self-denial and starts feeling like self-support. There is a moment in the saving journey that doesn't look dramatic from the outside, but feels unmistakable on the inside. Nothing magical happens. No fireworks. No sudden freedom. But something asterisk clicks asterisk. For the first time, you stop feeling like you're guarding money and start feeling like money is guarding asterisk you asterisk. This is the turning point most people never reach. Before this moment, every dollar you save feels fragile. Like it's already half spent. Like it's just waiting for the next problem to claim it. After this moment, money starts to feel solid. Not exciting. Just steady. And that steadiness changes how you think. The biggest shift isn't the number itself. It's the asterisk silence asterisk that shows up in your head. You stop constantly running worst-case scenarios. You stop rehearsing emergencies. You stop calculating consequences for every small decision. Your mind gets quieter. Not because you're rich, but because you're no longer exposed. Margin is what allows mistakes without collapse. Delays without panic. Choices without fear. Before this point, you're living one layer above survival. After it, you're finally living asterisk from stability asterisk. And that changes your identity. Before the turning point, you see yourself as someone who is trying to be responsible. Someone who has to concentrate. Someone who could slip. After the turning point, you start seeing yourself as someone who handles things. Someone who can absorb shocks. Someone who doesn't unravel over normal life events. That shift is subtle, but permanent. You don't wake up and announce it. You notice it when something goes wrong. And you don't spiral. You notice it when an expense appears. And you don't feel attacked. You notice it when you say no or yes. And it feels intentional instead of fearful. Money stops being an emotional trigger. It becomes a background system. This is why people who reach this point almost never go back to living paycheck to paycheck. Not because they suddenly become disciplined superheroes. Stability becomes something you protect naturally. Another thing changes at the turning point. Time starts to feel different. Before, months felt like obstacles. You were just trying to get through them without damage. After, months start to feel like building blocks. You think in longer stretches. You plan without panic. You imagine options without immediately dismissing them. The future stops feeling abstract and threatening. It starts feeling editable. This is where money shifts from defense to offense. Not in an aggressive way, in a quiet way. You're no longer just avoiding harm. You're positioning yourself. positioning to say no, positioning to wait, positioning to choose. And here's the part people misunderstand. This turning point doesn't make you fearless. It makes you asterisk proportionate asterisk. Problems still happen. Expenses still exist. Life still surprises you. But the emotional reaction finally matches the size of the problem. An inconvenience feels like an inconvenience, not a threat. A mistake feels correctable, not catastrophic. That proportionality is what calm looks like. This is also where saving starts to reinforce itself. Before the turning point, saving requires effort. Why would you give up this buffer? Why would you choose to feel exposed again? You don't save because you're supposed to. You save because you remember how heavy things felt before. That memory becomes motivation. And the irony is this: once saving starts to feel rewarding, you don't need to push nearly as hard. The hardest phase is behind you. This is why quitting early is so tragic. Not because people are lazy, but because they leave right before the experience changes. They assume the frustration is permanent. They assume this is what saving always feels like. It isn't. The early phase is not representative of the whole journey. It's the toll booth, not the road. You don't judge a city by its airport security line, but people judge saving by its most uncomfortable stage. The turning point proves something important to you. Not about money, about yourself. It proves you can delay gratification without resentment, that you can build something quietly, that you can trust yourself over time. That proof spills into other areas of life. You become more patient, more selective, less reactive. Not because you're trying to improve yourself, but because your nervous system finally has room to breathe. And that's what this whole process was really about. Not numbers, not rules, not sacrifice. Safety, psychological safety, decision safety, identity safety. So if you're still in the phase where saving feels pointless, where progress feels fragile, where effort feels unrewarded, you're not broken. You're not behind. You're not doing it wrong. You're just not past the turning point yet. And once you are, you won't need anyone to convince you to keep going. Because for the first time, your money will finally feel like it's working asterisk with asterisk you, not against you.